and throwing these up on YouTube. Okay. So let's talk about constants. You know, in Ruby, we capitalize first letter. And then we can like puts out pi, run that. Remember, if we like try to change this in Ruby, we get a warning. I'm just gonna comment that out. So let's do a const in JavaScript. So const. So with JavaScript, we use the const keyword. You can run that. Node. So there we go. Let's come in here and change pi to 4 or whatever. If I run this in JavaScript, this breaks. So this is a error. So it's a little different. You know, if I try to reassign, I mean, you would never want to do this anyway in either language, but just a little difference, like in Ruby, gives you a warning if you try to reassign a const. In JavaScript, it just breaks. So I kind of think it's better to break, because why would you want to redefine something that's constant? Like if that ever happens in your code, that's probably a bug, right? If accidentally somewhere in your code you like re-updated pi, that's probably not going to do you well. So JavaScript gives us an error, Ruby gives us a warning. So those are constants. Let's talk about functions. Okay, so functions in JavaScript. I'm going to say this right now. There's a lot of ways to write these. To keep this simple, I'm going to just do what's called an arrow function for now. So here's how I'm going to write if let's do it in Ruby, since we know Ruby. Let's just do a simple function in Ruby, and then we'll write it in JavaScript. So let's do functions. Let's write a say hello function. You know, that's going to take in some name to say hello to. And we're going to just puts out hello name. We can call our function. Actually, well, let's okay. Let's say hello. Right, basic function in Ruby. Let's look at that in JavaScript. Let's write that same function in JavaScript as a, like I said, there's a lot of different ways in JavaScript. For now, I'm just going to use arrow functions. So const say hello. I'll follow the convention of camel case. I'm almost declaring this as I am declaring this as a variable. I'm going to set this to a function. Now that's how I write a function, an arrow function in JavaScript. I have my parentheses, then a hash rocket, and then 2 curly brackets. And this is where I can put any parameters. In the last one we had name. And within the curly brackets, that's where I can do stuff. So here we just want to console.log. So I wanted to interpolate this. So how do we interpolate in JavaScript? I use 2 backticks. Hello. Then I do $sign name. So backticks, is interpolation. So inside of, just like inside of this pound square brackets, I can write Ruby. With inside of the $sign square brackets, I can write JavaScript. And then I call my function, say hello, Tony. So with JavaScript, I can write functions just like I can in Ruby. They can take parameters. I can interpolate in JavaScript just like I can in Ruby. It's just different syntax. So if you start remembering these as concepts, like interpolations, functions take parameters, when you forget about maybe the specifics, that's where you can use Google. Like, oh, how do I interpolate a string in Ruby? How do I interpolate a string in JavaScript? I think the important thing to know is that they can interpolate a string. And then from the details, I don't really expect anyone to memorize. I Google basic stuff all the time because I kind of forget, like, oh, is it the split method or is it the splice method? Like, because they'll have similar methods in Ruby than in JavaScript, but they'll be named differently, but they do the same thing. So I'm always relying on Google to kind of help remind myself. But if you know what you can, like as just kind of high level what you can do, then that's going to help you navigate this kind of the just, huge sea of knowledge that there is. Cool. So I can run this Node.js basics, and that's working the same. So as you're writing a function in JavaScript, I think it's good just to stub it out, like before you do any of the work. So let's just do like another function that just says like, let's just do a hello world function. Hello world. I think getting in that habit right there of just, you do the const, you define your name of the function, you set it equal to parentheses #rocket brackets. This actually right here, this parentheses #rocket square brackets, that's a function in JavaScript. So I'm just declaring a variable hello world, and I'm setting it equal to a function. And let's just do a console.log. Because I'm going to start looking at some differences now between these two languages. So let's do this in Ruby. So let's run this in Ruby. There you go, hello world. Let's run this in JavaScript. Okay, so in Ruby, it's running it. This runs. This does not run. I actually have to, in JavaScript, call it by using the parentheses. In my mind, this is a feature. This is a good thing in my mind. This is a good, nice feature that this does not run. But we'll kind of talk about that in this later. But the point is, if you want to run a function in JavaScript, you have to use, you actually have to call it with the parentheses. You can do the same thing with Ruby. That also works in Ruby. So Ruby, I don't even think. Ruby, you don't even need the parentheses there. When I say hello, Tony, I really don't even, I can throw them in there, but you really don't even need them. All right. Let's do another Ruby function. Let's do a def add. So this takes in a num1, num2, end, and let's just do num1 plus num2. So just as a review of functions in general, I think it's common that functions often return values. It's very common that your function is going to return something. In this case, our add function is going to return num1 plus num2. And then we can do something like, store return value of function in a var, or do something with the return value. So I could come in here, declare a variable sum. That's going to be equal to add, 1 and 1. And then I can put sum. And once again, if I'm like being, I don't even need the parentheses. So I can call my function, pass it 1 and 1, and assign that to the variable sum, and then put that out, and that's 2. So let's try that same thing with JavaScript. So add, it's going to take a num1, num2. There we go. So let's do num1 plus num2. Let's get these lined up. Keep that comment the same there. So let's do a let. So I'm declaring a variable, so I have to use this let keyword. Let sum equal add. Now I'm going to call that function. I'm going to console.log sum. So let's run this. That is undefined. So And I said this yesterday, it might have not made any sense, or it might have not really clicked or meant what I was saying. Ruby implicitly returns the last value of the function. Like by the last value, that could maybe be like the last line. So it's going to return the last thing. So Ruby does the add function. It does num1 plus num2. That is the last thing of the function. So it's going to return that value. But it's still returning it. With JavaScript, I need to explicitly say return. I can in Ruby say return. That is valid code. I can explicitly say, hey, return that. But I don't have to. And so I'll write it like that just to kind of show that. Questions on that? Let's talk about the return word, just briefly return demo. Say I have a function. I'm just going to say right here, return 1. And then right here, I'm going to put, whatever. I will never puts this. So a return will always end in the function call. So if I have a return, that's going to stop the function. So let's just say this, like puts, I guess I did, I will puts this, then we return 1, and I will never puts this. So if I run this, I need to run my function, return demo. See, I get that I will puts this, we will return 1, and then we never puts this. What happens if I puts out this function call? Line 61. Here's your question. What is this going to log?
The return value?
Yeah, the return value, which would be 1. This line right here, this is what's referred to as dead code. Because it's code I have, code that will never execute. This is never, ever going to run. I think I might even have it set up in JavaScript. To give me a warning. See how, I don't know if you can really tell. And it's kind of grayed out right here in VS Code. And it's also like, if I hover over this, VS Code's telling me unreachable code detected. So VS Code's smart enough to read this in JavaScript to be like, oh, hey, you're never going to hit this code. So does that make sense? So the return, if you ever want to break out of a function and you just want it to return, you can use the return keyword, both in Ruby and JavaScript. That's true for all languages. There's just a small difference where Ruby has an implicit return, where if you don't say return, it's going to return the last thing. JavaScript, you have to explicitly say return. If we don't have the return value, it's going to, by default, return undefined. It's still going to do the work, but it's just not going to return it. Cool. So there's functions. So you pretty much see they're more similar than different, right? The syntax is definitely different, but how they work is the same. They both can accept parameters. We both can do work, and then we can return stuff from functions. Let's do like some logic. Let's do like a const. I don't know. Or let's in Ruby, let's do a function like I don't know, can drive. I did that one last time. Let's do it again. So let's say this has like this function takes an age. And we have an if, age is, greater than 16. I'm going to return maybe. Because I don't know, I think states are weird about 16-year-olds driving. I think if you're over 18, we'll say yes. If you're over 100, go back to might. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. How am I forgetting? I think I have a syntax error. So let's try running this unexpected end. I probably need ends for all of these. Yep, okay. So we have a drive function in Ruby. So let's put this out. Why is this not putting anything out on 76?
You don't have any rules for 16. Oh, and you're also not requiring a puts, you're just asking for a return.
Yeah, so let's first do the first thing of putting a puts can drive. It's not really putting anything out. Okay, now I'm getting this argument, I'm expecting an age. I did have an age in there, I had 16. So it's returning nil. Any ideas why this is returning nil? And Michael kind of led to this. But I don't hit any of these statements. So actually what Ruby does is it goes through all of this code, boom, 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 gets to the last thing, which is, remember Ruby implicitly returns the last thing, which is nothing. So it just returns nil. If I had a 1 here, then it would be 1. So it implicitly return this 1. So let's maybe fix this. If age is, under 16 or let's do 16 or under, let's say no. I'm still not doing that because I'm still not actually testing for the 16 case, right? So I'm going to make this one like an equal sign. And then if I do 15, that's a no. Just one quick question. Do I need this last check right here? It's kind of a trick question. Yes, I do. What I could have done, do I need this first check right here? I could maybe have done it like this. That'd just be a different way I could write that. Could check all my cases, and if they don't match, then at the very end I return no. That could be another way I could do that. I could also write this as a else if statement. Oh, and then I would need an else here. So there's a lot of different ways I could write this, but once again, let's just keep it like this way and then see how we would do that in JavaScript. Can drive, that takes an age, do my arrow function. If age is greater than or equal to 16. So once again, it's going to be very similar. Except with an if statement, I'm going to use curly brackets. Then I can have it else if. So I still have an else if in JavaScript, it's just spelled differently. Something that in Ruby I don't need, I don't actually need these parentheses in my if statement. I can have them, but that will still work. With JavaScript, I do need the parentheses, like that's going to break. But once again, it's still kind of the same idea here. So just kind of checking this. Yes, and then an else. We'll just kind of. I mean, I skipped one of the else ifs, but you kind of get the point, right? It's very similar. We have an if statement, we can do else ifs, we can do an else. It's just a little different syntax. What if we have like a Boolean that's like a has driver license? Then I could do like a and statement. So in JavaScript, just like we can do in Ruby, we can have the ampersand. So then I can do like can drive, 16 and true. So with JavaScript, we also, I mean, this is not the logic, it's not correct here, but we also have the and, or, and the not operators. Right, the and, that's and, that is your or, and your not. those are the same in Ruby. So stuff like if statements, else ifs, there's also switch statements. There's switch statements in JavaScript, switch statements in Ruby. The syntax is going to be different, but they behave the same. So that's kind of the, like, I think it is more important to understand, you know, what a if else statement is, or, you know, a switch statement is, etc., than knowing how to write them. Does that make sense? I know what an if else statement is. I know what a switch statement is. I sometimes have to Google, so sometimes forget, like, how do I do a case statement in Ruby again? How do I do a switch or case statement in JavaScript? Should we talk about a switch statement really quick? Let's go over that. Okay. Because technically, really, let's just look at a switch statement, or it's a case. We want to use these when you have a lot of options. Like this, a switch case, and I'll say this, it's kind of like an alternative to if else if statement. They both work. Like one's not going to work better than the other. They do the same thing. It's just different syntax. So in Ruby, we can go ahead and do, let's just do a def case example. Or we could do the same example with this can drive. Let's just with a case statement. So what I can do is, you know, this would once again take an age, and then I can do my case. So the case is going to be the age. And then I can use a when. And then I can put in a conditional. I'm just going to put in this. I could do like a specific number. I could do like when 17. So what I'm doing, I'm just matching like this age. So if the age is, actually, let's do less than or equal to 17 or 16. So if it's less than or equal to 16, we can do stuff here. When it's 17, we can do stuff here. And so I can just have as many cases as I want here. So it's a good way to handle like a lot of cases. And it can be like, we could do this with an if else if statement. It's just maybe a little cleaner. And then I can like finally have an else. Puts, I don't know, I guess at this point it'd be like greater than 19. Run that. See, I have 17 and we put no 17 here. Make it some more clear. We're logging just that 17 value. Right? You could write this as an if-else statement. Or is it not? Oh, maybe I can't throw in a less than 16 because this is saying greater than 19. Oh, yeah, I don't think I can actually put in a Boolean. I'd have to match it. That. All the values. So I could do multiple values. So I can't do a Boolean expression. I have to specifically match the values, but I can match multiple values by separating them with commas. Does that make sense? So that can kind of be a way when you're like, it's this, the case statement is, and the if else statement, it's kind of just which one you think is cleaner. I think when you're talking about maybe your homework, like a menu, like a case statement might be cleaner. So maybe you have like, it's just like one, that would be like your main menu. You know, when it's 2, when it's 3, etc. Just might be a little more cleaner than a else if. That's really the gist of it. Does that make sense?
So why can't you put Boolean?
Because it needs to match the specific value. So this selection is going to be like, it needs to match, like, because behind the scenes it's probably checking to see, hey, does selection equal this case 1? Does selection equal 2? Is that like, so handle selection, if I do handle selection 1, this selection value would become 1. So it's like when 1, well, that puts the main menu. So if you want to do it as a Boolean, you're probably going to use the else if. But you can match multiple cases. And there is kind of like a default else to match, you know, everything else. So in this case, this would be not 1, 2, 3, or 4. Because I've handled 1, 2, 3, 4. So anything else that this case statement gets will come here.
Is that because it's not running through it in like in any sort of order? It's just seeing like it can match multiples on the case statement, or just that's the way it is?
Okay, so let's get a little nuanced here. So let's do, let's just do X, Y, and I don't know, A. So Let's say I have a case statement. When one, I'm going to put X, but then I also have this extra check when 1 or 3 puts C. Let's run this. So I save that. So it puts X, we don't put Z. So it's running this in order, like 1, 2, 3, because I pass in 1, so it doesn't match that one. So it's not just kind of running randomly, it's going through kind of top to bottom. An if else statement's going to do that too. Like once one of the if else hits, it's going to stop with that if else code. Like if we get an age of 15 here, it's going to return maybe, and it's not even going to check the rest of those. Does that answer your question? All of this stuff usually generally, it does start at the top and it goes down to the bottom, but there can be things like returns that would stop it from keep on going. But this one, once again, it's going to hit the 1 and then it's just going to stop.
Could you do like when purple or something, or does it have to be numbered?
No, it could, yeah, it could be a string. When purple. It just needs to match purple. So then I could call this function with the string purple. And there we go. So yeah, this can be good for matching strings and numbers. Probably numbered, those are going to be your, yeah, major cases there. Like I said, this is kind of like anything you can do. It's kind of like an extra thing. If you can do everything that you can with a switch with the if else statement, so you would never need to use it. It never gives you any additional functionality than the if else statement. It just gives you this different option to write something in a different way.
So there's not necessarily a reason it can't take in a Boolean statement. That is just the rule.
Yeah, it's just matching whatever this value is. That's just how they work. I really thought it did work with a Boolean. I'm going to need to like look at that. But I mean, obviously it didn't right here. Here's the easiest way you can test that is just to when true. But yeah, that's not working. So I need to match all of those cases. Cool.
When you're saying is true, you're testing to just see if there's a value in there at all.
No, I was saying, does it work for Booleans? What happens, like, so let's go back to an if statement. If I say if true here, what does this do to my function? Or what does it do to like these lines of code?
It's always going to return maybe.
Yeah. If I say if true, this is always going to return maybe. And this becomes dead code. That's kind of what I was testing here. Is like, well, can I just do, I was just seeing, does it work with Booleans? So if it was true, it should return that, but it doesn't. So that was like the ultimate test to see if it worked with Boolean.
But it did return that, didn't it?
Yeah, I see that on there.
Oh, well, because I have one. Oh, wait, one true. Let's try that again. Because when I'm calling it, see how I have the 17 and 14? That's the 17 value, and then greater than 19 for the 14. So it's skipping over that.
But what are you analyzing to be true or not?
I'm seeing, so that was me, this is me like testing this, how this works behind the scenes. I wanted to, because you asked, does this work like, or I was trying to figure out, does this work with Booleans? And it doesn't.
It would if
That's
age
what I was trying to say with the if else statement.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Shut up, Siri. Being mean to Siri. Because with the if else statement, if I make that true, that is going to always return maybe now. Like you would never.
If what's true? If 15 is true?
So this is how an if statement works. So I think this is a good concept to grasp. Because what is this expression? What type of data is age less than 18? If I was like, what type of data is that? What data structure?
Boolean.
Yeah, that's a Boolean. So age greater than 18 this is going to either be true or false. So I'm just kind of manually putting in true here because I wanted to ask you the question, what is this can drive function going to return? Now, like, it's more of like a brain teaser. Like there's no reason this would be horrible to do in real code. And why would that be horrible to do in real code? Because now I'm just defaulting this to true. So this if statement is always going to return maybe. It does not matter what I pass as the age. I mean, let me just write it down here. Like if I have an if statement, if true, puts yes, else puts no. Like, are we ever going to put no?
So I have a quick question. So you're doing the quotation marks. Sometimes you do the singles and sometimes you do the doubles. Is it supposed to be the doubles or does it not matter?
Yeah, with Ruby, it really doesn't matter unless, I mean, there's a couple things. Okay, let's first talk about like the Ruby programming language. Like, where does it actually matter syntactically? And the one place where it actually does matter is if I'm doing interpolation. So if I'm doing interpolation, then I have to use double quotes. But other than that, I might use double quotes or single quotes. Those are both going to be strings.
Is there any reason you would ever need the single quotes or should I just do double quotes for everything and then I won't have to like worry about it?
Yeah, you can use double quotes for everything. That becomes like we talked about this earlier, like a convention question. What convention? I mean, one time you might want to use single quotes is what if I want to have double quotes in my string? Like,
Could you do double quotes like just twice there as well?
I cannot. Because if I do double quotes twice, that's going to end this string right there. And then I'm going to have this no. Now, see how it's kind of syntactically highlighted differently?
Yeah.
So it says, he said, that's going to be a string. Then this is going to be like a Ruby. Ruby's going to think this is like a variable or a function. And then it's going to be an empty string.
Sorry, I know we're getting a little off topic of the logic you were trying to say, but I know how to do it in JavaScript, but in Ruby, how would you do just single quotes if you wanted, like, he said no in single quotes?
Oh, in JavaScript, if I wanted to do the same thing, sorry,
In Ruby.
So
if I wanted the he said no to be in Ruby, or sorry, he said no to be in single quotes, like the no part to be in single quotes.
then that's where I'd use double quotes.
So you can do double quote. Oh, okay. So they just have to be different. So if you want whatever's inside the string to have quotes, it just needs to be different than the quotes the string was using.
Yeah, because and the reason being there, like, it's just, once again, I would cut, because I'd be like, it's going to cut off that string. So is that getting that? He said no. Is that figuring it out? Oh, that's giving me an error anyway. So yeah, that's not working. So if I wanted to do that, double quotes, there you go. So yeah, that's like a little, like, kind of edge case, but really what it comes down to is, like, yeah, the convention. Does your company use single quotes or double quotes? I think it's pretty much double quotes most of the time. So
Okay, so back to this whole true statement thing. I still don't get how if true is always going to be true. Why?
because how an if statement works is, let's say we have like a let, or sorry, not age equals 21. Age greater than, 2. What behind the scenes, before this is evaluated, Ruby's going to do this math. It's going to say age is equal to 21. Is 21 greater than 2? That is true. Then it's going to put true. So what is expected in an if state, in like this if part, is a Boolean. Or, I mean, we'll also talk about like truthy and falsy values, but does that, like, at the end of the day,
that makes sense now. I understand. Okay, thanks.
and that's where we can get into like these weird, like, true or false, not true. You can make these like kind of a little big, but is this true or false? Well, let's see, true or false. That is true. True and not true. Well, not true is false. That is false. So ultimately, it has to evaluate that into like one single truthy or falsy value. Sorry. So yeah, if I have in my if statement, if I just hard code true here, that's always going to return maybe. And so this becomes dead code. And I think like JavaScript would probably even, if true, else. Let's see if I get like some syntax highlighting. See, it knows, like the compiler knows, hey, this is unreachable code. This is always evaluating to true. Sweet. What time is it? I think it's a good time for a break. Let's take a break. Is this kind of useful to see these side by side?
Yeah.
Is it confusing? Like I said, don't, like, especially with JavaScript, I think one of the harder things to learn about JavaScript is the syntax. So I think it's really important to type out JavaScript. Try and don't copy and paste it. Even if you're doing word for word, you want an example. It's not that I'm saying copying's bad, but the whole copy and pasting thing, type it out, because you're going to get a lot of that muscle memory. By actually typing it out, you're going to learn the syntax. So cool.
James, I have a quick question. So I see on the JavaScript, every time you do a function, you use constant to set it as a constant. Theoretically, could you do let, but you just don't want to because you would never want to change the function?
Yeah, that's kind of the reasoning behind that. And that's also how you're just going to see it in examples. Const is a little like in JavaScript, you'll see this const used quite a lot. And there's almost two different kinds of constants. There's something like pi. And in JavaScript, you would, like, if you're naming this variable pi, you would capitalize it just as a convention. But then you'll also see like something like age that, you know, could be whatever, but you would still call it a constant, just because in your app, you would never expect that age. Like once you define it, you would never expect it to change.
And so, sorry,
Go ahead.
is let something that you potentially are going to change, like when you put that in instead?
That's the difference with let. So let's say I have let age equals 12 and then age equals 13. That's, you know, okay. So that's the real difference between let and const. You know, if I declare a variable a const, I'm expecting that never to change in my app. It's a little weird because age, maybe the age could be 34, it could be like 99, it could be 1,000. So the age could be anything, but once I define it, I would never expect it to change. So I'm going to declare it as a const. I might have an app where I do have an age where it might change, and that's fine. Then I would use the let keyword. So yeah, with something like a function, I'm going to define a function. I'm never going to expect my function definition to change. So I'm going to use a const. I could say let, that'd be fine. But just being kind of a little more explicit, I'm going to use const. So I kind of like sidestepped that, but we got to it anyway. So it's a little less important as we're just learning JavaScript. But cool. Yeah, let's take a break. And like I said, I'll stick around too for questions. Let's come back at 12:05 if there's any more questions.
Hey, James, I was playing around with JavaScript just a little bit while you were doing that, and I wrote like a little bit of logic. And will something evaluate to true if you don't give it a value? So for instance, I kind of did what you did with the whole like driver's license, has driver's license and age. And when I didn't specify whether they had a driver's license or not, it was evaluated to true. It was only evaluated to false if I specified it was false.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we get back, because I kind of want everyone to hear that.
Oh, okay.
That is, yeah, that's another thing that is a little confusing, but yes, because the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. So like if I didn't put in the parameter for has driver's license, it will automatically be evaluated to true.
If you don't give it a value, that should evaluate to false.
That's what I was expecting, which is why I was confused when it came.
Yeah, I would expect if you gave it a value, we'll talk about it. Because, but I kind of want to go over that with everyone.
Okay.
Because
When are we coming back?
12:05.
All right, cool.
And I'm still here if anyone else has any other questions, but just let me know.
James, you there? Maybe not.
Yeah, I'm here.
Does Free Code Camp have anything on Ruby?
I don't know if they do or not.
I was looking at the menu and I didn't see anything.
As far as like basic stuff on Ruby and JavaScript, there's just like a plethora of information. But yeah, I don't know about specific websites. I kind of think it can be good to like look at a couple different ones and kind of get some different like just even if like Googling like a YouTube Ruby intro, like an hour video where they kind of just go over all the stuff, and then maybe what else? Like
I have looked for some of those videos, but they whip through it so damn fast. It's just the Free Code Camp I like is, you know, you put something in and it automatically tells you right away. It's, you know, if it works or not. You know, and it kind of helps because it formats some of the stuff. And I just thought when I was going through with the prep work, it was a nice setup the way they had the website, you know, how it taught you.
yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, with particular like specific ones, especially free ones. I think like what's one, Code Academy might have one, but that might be paid. It's do you like the videos? Because that's like, it's hard to recommend. It's just more because there's also like books or websites that kind of have examples. What kind of resources do you like?
I don't like the way like Free Code Camp did things because it would, you know, kind of give you the example, and it would give you not necessarily exactly how to do it, but it showed you kind of an example of, you know, the information goes in this section, in this section, this section. And then when you would try it, it automatically tell you, you know, if it worked or not. Kind of like the terminal, but it's just, you know, it gives you an example where the terminal just, you know, it doesn't, it just tells you whether it worked or not, you know, a quick error code, but it wasn't, you know, it didn't kind of teach you, you know, just, yes, it worked, no, it worked, here's where your problem is, but it didn't really, you know, giving you kind of examples. So I was looking around at Free Code Camp and it says responsive web certification, you know, and it goes JavaScript in front end, all that stuff, but it doesn't have a section for it. It's just, I kind of like the way that that website taught me the first, you know, HTML and CSS, not the way it did it.
Yeah, they probably might not have one specifically for Ruby, so you might have to, yeah, that UI in particular, find one. It might be harder to find something like that that's free. That type of stuff is generally more, I feel like Code Academy.
Code Academy has a Ruby, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they have a Ruby. I don't know if that's
General Assembly too.
is it? Yeah, I think it's free.
Code Academy, I'm pretty sure you pay like a yearly subscription too.
They might have, I know a lot of these places, and like for like, especially like the starter basic stuff, I think to kind of like lure you in, they like might offer that stuff for free, and then
they get you.
when you like want to do some more stuff, then they start to charge you. But
Yeah, it's just I need to do it multiple times to kind of beat it into my head to make sure it stays there.
yeah, I kind of like I kind of think this one can be good. I mean, this is less of a bit, this is more of a book. I'll select this out, the Ruby guides. Especially just for like when you're learning the basics, there are a ton of resources out there. So it's more just kind of finding like which one you like. Like lately, I've really been liking like books, like just look at like an online, like 300 PDF book. But when I started, I used to just like videos. I kind of now hate videos. Just like prefer books. So it's just, but the Ruby guides, this can be good. Like if you know what you're searching for, because they have like quick little articles. But I would try Code Academy because I think they do have a Ruby section that I think might have like what you're talking about, an integrated like terminal to code along with.
Yep.
So
I paid for the subscription on Code Academy and have done some JavaScript on there. And it's, for me, actually, it's worth the $200 that I paid for it. It's like, you get it for, I think, 12 months, but it's been really helpful. Just like, you know how like the free ones, they kind of like baby you and walk you through them all. Like give you the code to like copy and paste. I found Code Academy quite helpful that way because it's a little more hands off. So they still like work with you and check, but they don't exactly like just give you the code to copy.
I haven't done, I remember doing Code Academy when I first started coding. And then I did Udemy a lot. And yeah, like now I'm just a book reader now. That's kind of my go-to. Or who's heard of Medium? Medium's a good place. Medium's just a place where like people can write articles about anything, not just code, but you'll find some good like articles on Medium. That's usually more for like specific topics, like, oh, here's how you article on map functions. So I think as you're starting to code though, like a more I'd either recommend, there's like YouTube videos where it's like an hour of someone just going through like, here's some just quick stuff you can do in Ruby. Those can be good. A Code Academy class can be good, but really do, I think, start to find your own resources, the things you like. It's kind of hard for me to recommend. I mean, I can give out recommendations, but I think it really has a lot to do with what kind of learner you are. Like, do you like books? Like there's like free JavaScript books or Ruby books that are, 400 or 500 pages, and go through and just get the nitty-gritty details. And that can be a good way to learn. I actually am starting to, like I said, that's becoming my preferred method right now.
Free Code Camp has a video on Ruby, and it's like 4 hours long, but they break it up into really nice chunks of like, one of them like 10 minutes of arrays, but that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. I definitely recommend stuff like that. And also doing these tutorials from like a couple different sources. Because I think then you start to get repetition, and then you kind of start to hear it said, like it described in a couple different ways. And I think that can help make it click. Like you hear me describe it, you hear someone from Code Academy describe it, then you read about it, then you code it. And then you kind of just get it from all angles, and then it really starts to make sense because of just the repetition. That's going to it's definitely going to get a little harder as we get further in the course to find specific resources, because it's easy to find like the basic stuff, but as we get into like more like using Rails with React and authentication, that's where it's maybe a little harder to find the examples. So as far as fundamentals, there's so much information out there. So cool. Let's go ahead and get started. So there was a question asked about, I think the question was like, do you have to have true or false in your if statement? Or something like that was along the question. So let's look at the concept of truthiness and falsiness. I don't know how to spell those. Those really aren't words. They really are words in code in like programming, but let's just say we have a function that's like, and I'll do this in JavaScript, const test true. This is just going to take in some value. And if our value, so if this evaluates to true, we're going to return, let's do a console.log here. Truthy. Log falsy. So let's just do a basic test right here where we do true and false. Now this is, I'm not trying to be tricky here or anything. We're just, really true should be truthy, right? And false should be falsy. So let's just make sure we're not insane. I've already declared age. I need to get rid of these examples. So that's this error. Age has already been identified. So I did const age, and now I'm trying to do a let age. It doesn't like that I have those two variables as a const and a let. So I need to delete those. Okay. And let's also like interpolate this so we get a little more information in our console.
So when you call the function test true at the bottom, what would happen if you didn't pass it a value true or false?
Okay, so yeah, let's get into that. But let's just get this. So I just put in true is truthy, false is falsy. So yeah, let's pass in nothing. Undefined is truthy. Okay, that's interesting. Let's do 0. What did I script here? Throw error. Did I?
I think you're missing an S, JS basics dot
Oh,
J.
I called the wrong file. Cannot find module. Yeah, I called the wrong file name, JS basic. Okay. 0 is truthy. Let's do.
Both of your statements say is truthy.
Oh, they're both saying, oh, that. Okay. I was like, wait, this is confusing me. There's a good old. That is what is called a, what I just did, having this as truthy. That's referred to as a logic error. So we've seen like syntax errors, right? That's when my syntax is wrong. These are actually nice. These are easy to find and just break your code. I copied and pasted this and left that as truthy. That's a logic error. That's like my code is going to run. I'm gonna but give bad, results. These are the ones that like really cause big problems in the software world. It's kind of like the if statement, like if I was checking to see like if age is greater than 21, and I really meant to say like equal to. Like these are the logic errors that really screw up your code. So they're bad because they don't break your code. They're syntactically correct, but it's the logic that's bad. So these ones can be hard to find because they don't break. There was one bug. This is where this was like a NASA bug. They sent up a spaceship to Mars, like a lander, and it like crashed. And then they realized they didn't convert because they had teams working on like in America and Europe. And there was, I don't know who they blame, but like one team forgot to convert from the metric to like the US to the standard system in the code. So they had software that was like written for the metric system, but one team was using the standard system. So it was just. So
I
that's
have a quick question. When I run this, it's putting the like $ with the curved parentheses in there with the value. I must be doing something slightly wrong, but it looks exactly like yours. So I can't figure out exactly what's up with it.
You're probably using a quote mark instead of a backtick.
Okay, that is definitely what I'm doing.
You have to use the tick. So that's just underneath the escape key.
Underneath this. Okay, sweet. Thank you.
So let's change that back to falsy. Because I was like, undefined is truthy and 0 is truthy. That's weird. Okay, now I got that other error. Okay, here we go. This is much better. So truth is truthy, false is falsy, 0 is falsy, undefined is falsy. I'm calling that twice. So yeah, I can, what is undefined an actual value in JavaScript? let's do like 1. So we have 0. Let's try like something like 1. 1 is truthy. Let's try the string yo. Yo is truthy. Some other values that we have in JavaScript are null. Null is falsy. Let's try like a empty array. It's not printing it out, but that empty array is truthy. I think if I got all the falsy values. Oh, wait, there's one more. So I'm going to do these in order so we can. So here are our falsy values. We have false 0. We have undefined. We have null. There's also another one called nan. Nan just stands for not a number. I know I'm forgetting one because I know there's 6 of them. What is it? Undefined, 0, null, false. Crap, I'm gonna have to Google it. Oh, yeah, it's an empty string. Okay. So these are what are considered falsy values. These are truthy values. So any number that's not 0 is a truthy value. Like -1. Obviously true is truthy. A string that's not empty is truthy. We could have an object. These are all truthy. I think a function, I can write a function in here. Let's see if a function is truthy. Yeah, function is truthy. So when we do an if statement, we can have these values that are not true or false, but they evaluate to true. Like they can be considered what's called truthy or falsy. So in JavaScript, that's our fault. I think it's just more important. Like the false values are false, 0, undefined, null, nan, and the empty string. Let's see. Let's see if there's false. Let's see what they are in Ruby. I'm going to Google this. So let's do the same thing in Ruby. They're going to have a similar concept of truthy and falsy values. So let's come down here. Def test true. This value. Set this function, take the value. Let's interpolate this. How is truthy? Now it's falsy. So we can try this. We have false, we have 0, we have nil. Let's see if an empty string, I'm not sure if an empty string is falsy or not. But then we can also set like test true. I mean, true is going to be truthy. A number should be truthy. each string should be an actual string should be truthy. Let's try running this node Ruby basics. Okay, invalid token, line 1.
You need Ruby basics, not node Ruby basics.
Oh, okay. So did I run the wrong file? Oh, nope. Yep, I did. So I'm using node to run my Ruby file. And yeah, that's why it's failing in line 1, because it's a pound sign and JavaScript's like, I don't know what that is. It's going to break. So I need to do Ruby. Spell it right. Ruby basics. Okay, so false is falsy, 0 is falsy, an empty string is falsy, or nil is falsy. These are all true. Let's do puts true here. So in Ruby, an empty string is truthy.
0 is truthy too.
Is it? Oh, 0 is truthy in Ruby. Damn it. Okay. Yeah. So I guess it's just false, and false is falsy, nil is falsy. I'm going to Google this and see if I can find any more nil value or falsy values in Ruby. Why are they making this so hard to find? Can anyone see it? I think it might just be these two, false and nil. Yeah, only false and nil are falsy. So there you go. So yeah, it is a little 0 being truthy is, or being falsy is a little, I can see that going either way, because in binary 0 is false for sure, but it is actually a number. An empty string, that's kind of like a little confusing one, if that should be truthy or not. But undefined and null, those should probably definitely be falsy. Nan, I don't know. Cool. So that's just a little thing you might run into. And actually, this undefined being falsy is going to be very useful. And once we get to React, it's going to let us write a shorthand. Let's talk about one other thing, since we're kind of on like this if else statement. Let's talk about a ternary. Has anyone run into a ternary? Let's just say I'm going to rewrite, or I'm going to write a similar function like test true. Or let's just do like is odd. Let's do something basic. This is going to take a number. So I could do something like this. If num mod2 equals 0, I could like return the string odd. Else I could return even. Or sorry, I got these reversed. That'd be even and that would be odd. And then I could say like is odd, pass it 5. And set this equal to a variable. Nothing new here, and then I could console.log x. Make sure I run the node version of this. So node Ruby base. Node. Okay, so that's odd. I'm going to rewrite this in a different way. I could say return num mod 2 = 0 question mark even odd. This is what's called a ternary. It's a quick way to write it's a shorthand to write a if else. And this is used quite a bit. Just because it's a little, you will see it's cleaner than the if else syntax. It might not be right now, the first time seeing it, but what it's saying is this is the condition. So this should be a value that should return to a, so now I can say truthy or falsy value. So if I say true or false, that's now truthy or falsy. So this returns to a truthy or falsy value. If this evaluates to a truthy value, it's going to set, it's going to return even. If it's a falsy value, then it returns the second thing, which would be odd. And it's the same syntax in Ruby, where you do the question mark. So it's this convention. You have your condition, question mark. This is the true case, and this is the false.
Do you need 3 question marks or do you only need 2 for JavaScript?
It's only just 1 question mark in JavaScript and Ruby. Let's try writing a couple of these, like let, and these don't have to be in a function. I could set let odd equal to 1, mod 2 = 0. Let's do 3 mod 2 = 1. Or let's just say not odd, let's just do value.
I meant a question mark, or not question mark, keep saying that. I meant equal sign, sorry, where you've got like return num to equal question mark.
Oh, okay, yeah, let's actually, let me get to that in 1 second, just to not sidestep, but I'll come back to that. So let value equal, so I'm doing 3 mod 2, does that equal 1? If, that's odd. I mean, this is kind of a weird one because I'm hard coding this. This is always going to return true. But does that make sense? If this is, or I could just even just say like true here, and then ask you, what is value going to be equal to? Without me even running this code. So we have the condition. If the condition is true, it's going to go to the first thing. If it's false, it's going to go to the second thing. So what is value going to be?
Odd.
Yeah, it's going to be odd. If I switch that to false, then it's going to be even. So I could almost give you like, it's kind of like this, yes, no. So with what we just learned, what is nan going to be? Remember, is nan truthy or falsy?
Falsy.
Falsy. So then our value is going to be no. Let's just run this. No. What about 1? Is 1 truthy or falsy? It's truthy, so that should be yes. 1 greater than 2. No. That's our ternary. We're gonna use this a lot because I could like run some function here. Or I could do like another function. So this can really help us clean up our code. So we'll get practices with, you'll, at the end of this course, you're gonna know ternaries really well, especially once we get to React. But let's also talk about the one question that was asked about the equal sign. So here is my question for you. So I'm going to ask this question back. What is the difference between these 3 signs? And I'm going to say in JS. What about what does when you see 1 equals sign, what do you think of? I'll give you a hint. It starts with an A.
Finding a value.
Yeah, this is assignment. Like I'm saying, let some var equals some value. 1 equals sign is assignment. What about 2 equals sign? Or 3? Did anyone see this?
Like comparison of value and comparison of value and class or something, right?
Yeah. So let's just start with these 2. This is comparing. So let's switch this to like x and have x equal 1. So that's our assignment. And then let's do like a console log x equal 1. And then also a x equal 1. I already have x. I'm going to call that y. Okay. So those are both true. So line 124, 125 are true. We're just comparing to see, hey, does 1 equal y? So what's the difference between the 2? And Mike, you're kind of alluding at this. It's like doing a little bit of a different comparison. Let's go ahead and do 2 more of these, still with y. I'm going to have these compare. So y is 1, the number 1. Let's run this. So this is true. This is true. This is true, but this one is false. So the difference between the double equals and the triple equals is they're both checking to see if they're equal, but the double equals tries, if it can, try to like cast or like change, or essentially like ignore the data type. So that's right here, even though we have, the number 1 equal 1, that's saying it's true. Because JavaScript behind the scenes will, convert this string 1 into a 1 and be like, oh, those are actually equal. So convention, and has anyone heard the term best practice? So you might start to hear best practice, like because now we have a couple ways to do something. What's the best practice? Like, which one should I use? Best practice is going to be to use the triple equals, unless you have a specific reason to use the double equal. Any ideas on why it's better to use the triple equal? Any guesses?
So you don't accidentally change data types?
Yeah, it's not going to, so this isn't going to like change one to a string. Like one's still going to be a number, but what the harm of this is, does the number one actually equal the string one? Is, you know, that probably could be a problem, right? Because what if I have like an if statement? Let's say we have like a, yeah, I mean, it just the case is here, like it might be like, this might be causing a problem because I might think that one is now a string. Let's just do it. Let me just do this example. So I'm going to say like, let's say we have like a bank app. And so I have like a deposit amount or something. That is like the string 100. And if I do something like, I mean, this is a really like far-fetched example, but like you'd probably never see this, but if deposit amount equals 100, and let's say we have like, you know, our account balance. I'm sorry, I'm doing snake case for some reason, but that's like 1,000. I could say like my account balance plus equals my deposit amount. I might not like see, because usually when you're working with code, you're not going to see like this, that this is a string. You're just going to see this code like, oh, if deposit amount equals 100, then we can, you know, maybe like if it equals 100, they get like a bonus. But if we run this code, when I look at this code, I might think that the deposit amount is a number. And this is going to be true, even though it's a string, and then I'm going to add it. Well, what happens when I add these two numbers together? Well, now it did string concatenation. So my balance is not 1,000, it's like 1,000,000. What is that? 1,000,000? Well, I don't know if I'm just being strict, like that one, it never hit. So using the answer kind of is by using like the loose equality checking, I might potentially create these, you know, kind of nasty bugs down the road for myself. And by making sure that I'm matching not only the number, but the type, is going to help protect me as a developer. So this is like, you know, prone to those logic errors we're talking about. and other bugs. So it's just, that's why we'd say it's best practice to use the triple equal. You'll sometimes see me use the double equal, and that's me being lazy or just forgetful. So you'll sometimes even have what's called a linter, and you might see this when we get to React. Like it will warn you. It's like, hey, it'll be like, hey, I saw a double quote. You should use or I saw a double equals. You should use a triple equals there.
I don't understand. Okay, I saw a double quarter should use 8 hours. I saw a double equals. You should.
Okay.
Okay,
Dude,
let me know if there's anything else I can help you with.
Sorry. I have like the touchpad, and like it's super sensitive. If I just nick it like in the right spot, it activates Siri. So another thing that it can do is I can hit the mute button. I've done this before because like I just have to nick it and I can put my computer on mute, and then I can't hear any questions. So it might sound like I'm ignoring you. So I've done that before. But they're getting rid of that. Does anyone have that? Do you know what I'm talking about? The trackbar on the Mac. There's like on the Mac that they built, the new Mac they built like 2 years ago, they have like a touch screen bar where like the F12 buttons are. So it's like a touch screen.
I know
And
what you're talking about, but no, I don't have it.
yeah.
I have it on mine.
So yeah, if I kind of like it, but yeah, if you can like nick it and it will like mute it, or I'll turn on Siri. They're getting rid of it. I think overall people didn't like it. So in the new Macs, they don't have them. So let's see. I do want to, I know we're going a little longer. Before lunch, I just want to talk about arrays and hashes so we can review those. And tomorrow, I know today we're going to talk about loops. We kind of went a little longer, but that's fine. I was also planning on tomorrow to talk about this, so we have plenty of time. So tomorrow we'll really hit arrays and hashes and objects in JavaScript and loops, go over those more. Kind of the same way we're doing now, but let's talk about arrays. Okay, so arrays are nice. Arrays are pretty similar in all languages. So say we have a nums array, 3, 4, 5. We can access those elements with the indexing. So puts, nums at 0. That's going to put the first thing right. And then we just can count from 0. So it's from that. We got our first element. So in JavaScript, arrays are going to be very similar. And we can also index them in the same way. So let's do this. Let's do our console.log nums at 0. Same thing. They're all going to have, arrays in Ruby, have methods, have built-in methods. So for that, what I'm going to do, that's like the root, I would say here, Google and Ruby docs to look at those. But there's things like, nums.push. To add. So we can add an element. We can remove an element. we can loop over, well, let's not talk about loops yet. So we can add, remove. Ruby has like a sort method. We can sort. What other things? Can anyone think of other things we can do with arrays? I mean, there's a lot, right? IRB dot methods. Lots of stuff we can do with arrays in Ruby. Likewise, in JavaScript, same thing. Arrays in JavaScript have some built-in methods. I'm just going to say Google to look at some of these. But we have like, you know, push. A lot of these are going to be the same. Push, there's a pop method. There's also a sort method. So a lot of these are going to have like similar names and can do the same thing. And then let's console.log nums here and run this. So I pushed on 11. I guess that doesn't really show me that great that I actually pushed it on there because then I popped it off. Nums.sort. I'm not going to talk about sort right now because I have to give that a function. I don't want to do that. It's a little out of scope. We'll talk about sorting in JavaScript later, but we can definitely sort an array in JavaScript. Do this in Ruby. Right, push ends at the start. Let's make this a 0. Three, four, five. Pop. Nums.pop. This doesn't look like it's popping off. Oh wait, no, it is. I'm adding 2 at the end. Yes, yeah, we'll talk about sort later. We need to like pass these a function to tell it how to sort. There we go. Let's talk about the each method, and then we'll probably take lunch. So we'll talk, actually, no, let's talk about hashes. So we saw hashes. Let's just do a person. And then this is what you talked about yesterday. So we could access an element from our hash like this by indexing it. Cool. So this is where it gets a little different. In JavaScript, these are not called hashes. These are going to be called objects. But I can still assign an object to a variable. And I can still access these objects. I'm going to do it in a little different way. I'm not going to do it by this index way. I'm going to do it by a dot notation. I could actually do it also with the index method, but this is a string, so I can do it like that. So two different ways. I'm going to say this way is more common. Let's run this with node. Console.log. There we go. So once again, these are just, think of these as like key value pair stores. Objects and hashes. Objects in Ruby and hashes in, sorry, objects in JavaScript and hashes in Ruby. But you see, as we've gone through this whole example, they still are, in my mind, these are more similar than different, right? Let's do one last thing, one last quick little demo, and this is what we're going to be working on tomorrow. So just kind of want to show it. So we did talk about how, you know, if we have, let's just do 2 people. Let's come in and make it an array of people. Let's be person 1, person 2. Like maybe we want to loop over all of our people and, you know, put out a message about them. So I could do a people.each do person. And right, that's just our each loop in Ruby. And then I can, and now remember, person in this case is just going to be a hash. So I could interpolate the person name, you know, is, and interpolate the person age. Let's see, person undefined variable person, oh, right here, line 164, since I changed those variable names. So I got an extra curly bracket there. But there we go, I can go through each of my things in my array, which is a hash, and then I can just do stuff with each thing. Here I'm just putting out a message, right? That's what you did yesterday. Could do the same thing with JavaScript, you know, come in here, create 2 people. Let me make sure I declare all these. And then create a people array. Person 1, person 2. And then I can also do an each method on, in JavaScript. It has a, it's just a little different. It's called for each. Okay, now here's where it gets a little different. So the Ruby method takes a block. This is a Ruby block, this do end. A block is something that's kind of specific to Ruby. With JavaScripts don't have blocks. JavaScript is just gonna, and you can almost think of as a block as just a function. So what I'm gonna do with JavaScript is I'm going to pass inside of here a function. Boom. There's my function. This is what's called a anonymous function, because I'm not giving it a name. I'm not saying like const function name equals this. I'm just placing in here right now a function. And this function is going to have one parameter. which I'm going to call person, because that's what it's going to go through each thing. And in this case, it's a person. So I'll just write this. Okay. This is a unnamed function. Right there. I can just pass that. I can pass an unnamed function inside of here to my for each, and it's going to call this log. It's going to call this function for each person. So I can do a console.log and interpolate, just like I did in the other example, person.name is person.age. So same thing. I mean, I'm doing the same thing here. It's just kind of a little bit of different syntax and rules. Let's make these actually different people. I'm going to Slack both of these files out, just so you have them in case if you have like a typo going on or something. And also feel free during lecture, if you get behind and like maybe you don't have an example that's working, you can always ask me like mid lecture, be like, hey, will you Slack this out? Starting next week, we'll also be using GitHub, so I'll always be pushing up the code examples to GitHub, so you'll always have access to the code there as well. But if I'm going too fast or you're not up to date on the code and you're trying to follow along, always feel free to stop me. I'm going to stop it here. Any questions? This is a lot, but hopefully this was also just, you know, we got a whole bunch of new information because we're totally learning JavaScript, but it was also just a review of the concepts that we've learned.
A super strange problem that I've never encountered happening, where when I run my JavaScript program, it stops giving me results after a certain point, and it doesn't give me any errors, but it's just not printing anything else after a certain point.
Cool. Let's do this. If you want to stick on and kind of debug this with me, you can stick on. If not, you can hop off to lunch. Let's meet back at the TA channel at 2 o'clock. But yeah, Madeline, you can share your screen and we can look at that. Does anyone else have any questions while she's getting her screen up? Oh, cool. For those of you who are leaving, have a good lunch.
Trying to juggle unmuting two different computers now. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can hear you now. Sorry. Okay, so I run the JavaScript. It doesn't print anything else after odd. And it seems like odd.
Okay, the first thing I see is that little white dot on VS Code. So let's make sure, let's save everything and run it again, make sure that's not the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I've saved it a lot of times.
Cool. So what about, let's see, Node.js basics. Let's go to the very bottom of this file and just put a console.log like done. Like in a string, so it doesn't, yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's not doing it. Let's scroll all the way up to the top. Let's put a console.log right at the start, just to say like start. Be another like make sure, because this is kind of strange.
That's really weird. Okay, that's working.
Okay, so we know we're on the right file. It's starting. So where do we say, where's that odd log?
In one of these, this is kind of grayed out. I don't know if that matters.
Oh, I see it. So yeah, line 102, you have a return. This is weird. You have a return. So it's running your program. So that return's not in a function. It's in your, just in like the root level of your code. So it is just saying, hey, return. So it's actually going to return from your program. So it just stops right there. So you need to get rid of that return.
Okay, and now at least it's running something and I'm getting an error later. And
Now it's going down to that line 109. Looks like we have an error there because y is not defined. So like 108, what I had in the example is like let y equal 1.
oh yeah, I think I just probably didn't get to that change.
Yeah, that can totally screw you up if you get one little thing wrong. So
Okay, now it's running everything. Cool. So it stops running. It stopped running at the return because why? Because it wasn't in a function.
yeah, because I mean, you're only going to want to use return in a function. Like you'd never want to use the return keyword outside of your function, and that you just kind of saw why. Like it's going to quit your code. So yeah, which I've actually never seen that before. So I didn't know that would just completely stop your code. Yeah, returns for, you want to use that inside a function. Because like line 61, you can see that there, you have a return 1, and then line 62 is like grayed out because it's like that's never going to get there. So, but that's fine for like, sometimes that's the behavior you want in a function.
So I guess that part of the lesson I kind of didn't completely understand. So why does it stop after a return? It won't do anything else after a return?
Because functions can only return one thing. So once they return something, they're done.
Okay.
Usually you would want that to be like, so how we have it there, you would never want to write it like that, but maybe you might have like an if statement, like if something is true, return 1. And then if it's not true, then the function can continue.
Okay.
That's a little more like kind of out of scope for, I mean, a little advanced for what we're talking about right now, which is some of the basic stuff.
Okay.
Cool. See, is that it?
That's it.
Well, I'm going to hop off. I got a meeting to go to, so I'll see y'all back at 2.